Yate.
Yate.
So my name is Pat McCabe, and I was also given the name Wiyakpa Najinwi, which translates somewhat into English as Woman Stand Shining. And I'm just really grateful to be here. I want to acknowledge the original peoples, the original caretakers of this land, the Osage Nation, the Shawnee Nation, the Miami Nation, the Cherokee Nation. So thank you, relatives, for all of your deep love and care for this land, and also to all the amazing, passionate Kentuckians that I meet here currently who also love this land, and so we share in that together. So I come from Dene Nation, so I'll introduce myself that way. She'e'iya, tachi inashli, aro ashi ibashishchi, ma'idishkeshne dashanale, klauschi daushiche, guataos dani inashli. So I'm telling you about my clans, just in case we're related by clan here. Just very honored to be here, and very honored to be with my colleagues and fellow panelists here. So I really need to start out with a song. The song tells me what we need here. On my way, I'm trying to remember who it was that told me that the bald eagles are returning to this area, is my understanding. And last year, you also were giving me the history of the Buffalo Trace. So I'm going to start out with an eagle song, and then I'm going to move on to a buffalo song. We-hi-ya, hey-ya, we-hi-ya, hey-ya, we-hi-ya, hey-ya, ho-way-o, ay-o, ho-way-o, ay-ya, ay-o. Heche wambli gleshkawa, uktakia beku, wana uweloyo, wana uweloyo, wana uweloyo, ayo, ayo, hueo, aya, ayo. Whoa, ayo, whoa, haya, whoa, ayo, whoa, haya, we haya, heya, we haya, heya, we haya, heya. We hi-ya, hey-ya, ho-way-o, ay-o, ho-way-o, ay-ya, ay-o. Heche wambli gleshkawa, uktakia beku, wana ieloyo, wana ieloyo, wana ieloyo, ay-o, ay-o, ho-way-o, ay-ya, ay-o. Wachi wa uelo wa yonki eloyo. Wachi wa uelo wa yonki eloyo. Eh ho. Wachi wa uelo wa yonki eloyo. Eh ho. Wachi wa uelo wa yonki eloyo, eya heyo. Tatanka hoyate ki wa chi e wa uelo wa yonki eloyo, e heyo. Wa chi wa uelo wa yonki eloyo, hey ho. Whew. That buffalo spirit. They are here. So I needed them to come and be here with me. We need them. We need their wisdom. We need their understanding of how to be here now. So I'm going to begin with something that I often begin with to kind of orient us in a new way. Because frankly,
probably the vast majority of the people sitting in this room, you were not trained to hear me. You were not trained to see me. And not because of my own personal glory or fame, but I think you do need to see me, and I think you do need to hear me. So I often start by talking about this way of orienting. There's a professor, Dr. Greg Cajete, that lives in New Mexico, and he wrote a book called Native Science. And in that book, he talks about how when he was studying the early anthropologists and how they saw indigenous people, he said they always used the words primitive and childlike to describe us, right? And he said, I love him for this, he didn't say, what a bunch of racists, he said, there's a system of thought going on over there that makes it such that every time they see us, that's what comes to their mind. I wonder what it is. That's an elder, right? And so he went to explore, who are these people that are saying these things? Why do they see it that way? Maybe if I understood their culture, I would understand why they see us that way and why they say those things. So as he examined, who were the authors of these books, these papers about us, and he realized that they were primarily English aristocratic men. So he said, all right, let me take a look at them in their culture. And in their culture, what he thought he was seeing, again, he's looking through his lens, so this is his best interpretation. He said, okay, so up until the age of 5 in their culture, they get to sing and dance and play and pretend all they want. But at the age of 5, it's time to get down to the serious business of being the educated man. And at that point, all these other things can become hobbies, but what begins to happen then is the education is all about training and honing the intellect. And so from then on, that's the way. That is the way, principal way of knowing anything. So when these men came over to this part of the world and they saw us, what did they see? Well, we were singing. We were dancing. We were talking to things that they didn't think you could talk to. We were seeing things that they didn't think you could see. And their only conclusion, based upon where they came from, was these must be very primitive people. These must be very childlike people. Even their grown men are engaged in the activities of children. Well, when Dr. Cajete wrote this and I read it, it changed everything for me. That was like one of the big turning points of my life, because it made sense of this world to me. And I think it really makes sense of this dilemma we're in this topic that we're studying all week here. What it said to me was, for my own people, we engage in the song and the dance and the visioning from birth all the way till death. And so we never stopped that way. We don't have this point where we say, okay, that's comes back here. No, we continue those things on. And what I'm going to say about that is the song is a way of knowing. Did you feel how everything changed in this room? Did you feel what happened in your body? The emotional rising, the soaring, So it's a way of perceiving reality in a very different way. And so I call it a way of knowing. And so what I'm going to propose here, and this is true of what we call indigenous people, and somebody asked me last night, how do you define indigenous people? And I'm going to say, for our purposes right now, that an indigenous person is a person that is of place. And so what I see is that these people that we find all over the world who, part of the hallmark of indigenous people, right, is their song and their dance. And that's because that's a way of knowing. It's a way of knowing place. So one of the other things that I always say to orient us is to say that if sustainability is the highest and most sought after technology on the planet, who should we be talking to? We should be talking to those peoples who've known how to live in one place over an extended period of time, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, in relative health, harmony, and happiness. Those are the premier scientists of understanding how to be here. Now, these same people that continue these practices from birth to death, so I'm going to say that they have a broad spectrum of ways of knowing. Is it a coincidence that having this broad spectrum of ways of knowing and the fact that they have sustainability, is that a coincidence? I don't think so. I don't think so. That's been part of my scientific inquiry. And so I'm going to say that having a broad spectrum of ways of knowing is intimately and intricately connected to sustainability, right? So I feel like I need to say that first before I even begin to talk about inner being, because if I just started out saying what I wanted to say about inner being, you would not understand where I am. So part of this dilemma, as I see it, is that science, and I'm going to go out a little bit further, and many faiths, I'm even going to say, have, well, science for sure, is coming out of this intellectual place, right? And so when I look at material science, reductionist thought processes that have really come to dominate our understanding of reality, they're coming from this intellectual place. And what the analogy that comes to mind for me is when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I'm going to say when all you have is an intellect, everything looks like things to be categorized, problems to be solved. It puts us in a very narrow zone of perception. And I'm going to propose to us, and maybe any of you who've ever been in a relationship of any depth and passion, whether it's between your child or with your sister or brother or your lover, your husband or wife, try going at that relationship with your intellect day after day. What happens? No. Y'all know that's not a good way to go. Right? And so that's what I'm perceiving in this whole conversation, is that when all we have is this place right here to try to make sense of everything that is going on around us, we are missing a big part of this picture. So I want to describe interbeing, and interbeing is a great word. There are very few English words that really describe indigenous concepts. They're completely different structures. In English, something is always doing something to something. And in indigenous language, it's almost all verbs, which is actually closer to what scientists are discovering. Everything is in motion. Everything is energy. I'm not actually a solid thing standing here. My molecule is slowed down and beyond, right? So what I want to say is that interbeing is a word that relates to, I don't think I said that I was also adopted into the Lakota spiritual way of life, and those songs I was singing come from that tradition. And that's where I get my name, Wiyakpa Najinwi. But in the Lakota tradition, we talk about the sacred hoop of life. And what we say is that every form of life gets to have a place on this sacred hoop. And every form of life has a perfect design for thriving life. If we go outside and we look beyond all the skyscrapers and everything out here and we find that little patch of earth here and there, if we get down and look at it, what we're going to see is everything there is trying to figure out one thing: how to make more life, how do we make more life? The ants are saying, how do we make more life? The birds are saying, the trees, everything. So I'm going to say the plan in this place is life. That's the plan. That's the creation that we were set in. That's our place, our home. And so what I'm going to say is that every single member of this sacred hoop of life has a perfect design for thriving life. And every single member of this hoop of life has to uphold their part, or the integrity of the hoop begins to fail. And I think that's where we're at the moment. So, as a human being, my question is always, how am I upholding my perfect design for thriving life? And for me, this is where our faiths can come in and tell us, you know. They have something to say about what that design looks like and what the enactment looks like, right? In my faith, I say that I need to be in harmony with all of the rest of the hoop. And actually, what we say is that human beings were the last to arrive here in this place. And that makes all of the other members, all of the other family members of that sacred hoop, my elders. They know much more about how to be here than I do. So it kind of flips some belief systems on its head, I know. But so that's how we hold it. So I'm always looking to my elders to say, how do we be here? That's why I called in that eagle medicine. That's why I called in that buffalo medicine. In particular for this beautiful place of Louisville on the river here in Kentucky. Because they know something about being here. And the fact that the eagles are returning, good job. Good job. So I guess that's how I want to talk about interbeing is I feel like at this point we are looking at, we're coming down to this question of asking, how do we, as the five-fingered ones, remember what our perfect design is for thriving life? And I really love that the words humility have been brought up, because I think we could stand to find that place of humility at this point. So I think I'm going to stop there as laying a little bit of a roadmap for future discussions. And I just really thank you for giving me your attention. And I also, I just want to tell you that I've been told, and there'll be more time, I'm actually on several panels more this week, for those of you who are going to be here, that this question that we are working in is crucial for us, that we need to address it. They've called it an archetypal wounding of humanity. How we have been relating to our sciences in particular, what sciences we've adopted and how we implement what we believe we know from them. So we're right on topic, we're in the right place, we're in the right time, and I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for starting us in song. Thank you for interpreting for us that when song comes from you, it's calling in. Can I ask you a question? You talked about how we need to broaden our ways of knowing. And I experience you as a woman, as a human being, as an indigenous person who relates to, as you shared with us, multiple indigenous traditions and pathways, legacies. A Navajo Dene woman living at Taos Pueblo, also carrying the Lakota ways. And you walk boldly through this modern Western world as well. Can you share with the group just a little bit about how you navigate that bridging inside yourself to allow you to do that so skillfully out here in service?
Well, when I was raised, my father went to Stanford University, and I was sent to East Coast boarding school. I attended Phillips Exeter Academy. In those places, I was taught to try to be competitive. And so the goal is to see what someone else is doing and see if you can just up that game just a little bit more, right? And you know, that wasn't sitting in my heart and my body, right? I began to deteriorate. In fact, I came to a spiritual crisis, which is how I ended up being adopted into the Lakota spiritual pathway. And I know that there are many people in the world who are suffering in that way right now. And I know we have young people sitting here as well. And so what ended up happening for me is I was met in a very visceral way by spirit. And that came through the Lakota spiritual practices of the Sweat Lodge and other things, the songs, learning those songs. And so what ended up happening was I ended up being a part of a community that was beyond human and beyond human ego. And to be met by the earth, to be met by the water, to be met and be called granddaughter in my heart and mind by the water, by the trees, by the wind. You know, it sort of took me out of that mindset. It took quite a long time to heal that. But at this moment, you know, what I know is I love this Mother Earth so much, so much. And I can, you know, like so many people who are on fire in their faith, you know, come to this place of being complete devotion and complete service. So when I walk out here and I see you, you know, what I say to Spirit is, you know, I'm going to do my best to give you a chance to speak to whoever is sitting here right now exactly what needs to be said. And so when it becomes not about me, this is not about me, everything changes. And you know, I call on that larger community to have their input here, to give their voice here. And I was really grateful in the earlier panel before we got to the questions, because I was like, wow, we're not even talking about this amazing branch of the human family of indigenous knowledge in our solution finding, but it kind of came around to that right at the end. So I was like, all right. Because I do think it's critical. That's why, you know, I'm not here to be cultural show and tell, but that's why our indigenous cultures are so important for all of us. This is the library of human understanding of how to be here.
Yeah. It's not indigenous knowledge or science. It is indigenous science. It is a science all its own. It's meeting. We're at a pathway meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gerardo, will you share some comments with our group from an entirely different perspective, and I wonder if there may be some overlap as well.
May I ask some question? Yeah,
Sure.
Exactly. No, you spoke, rightly so, that all of us, I think, we are kind of, our knowing is right now confined to the intellect, right, in general. And of course there is another type of knowledge that transcends the intellect. And you also referred to that. So how does it happen in your tradition that you can make that switch, you know, from intellectual knowing into non-conceptual or kind of transcendent knowledge? Is it through song? I mean, I think I understood that when you sing, at the end of the singing itself brings you to that kind of transcendent or seemingly transcendent state, right? But how do you remain in that state? Is it something that stays long, or it is just an experience that then disappears, or how does it happen? Is the aim in your tradition of like the inner being, or what are, you know, like what is our inner being? Is the aim in your tradition to recognize that inner being, and is that inner being a being that transcends the intellect and has a different type of cognizance or knowing?
Yes, I would definitely say it has a different kind of cognizance and knowing. Well, one, I guess the word that we use these days is either embodied or, there's another word, anyway.
Kinesthetic.
Kinesthetic, yeah. So that was the first big switch for me, was going into a sweat lodge and being literally with fire, water, earth, air, when you could get it. And just to be able to pray with my whole body was such a new experience for me. Because in the tradition that I had first been brought into with my grandparents and parents being taken to the Dutch Christian Reformed missionary residential boarding school, so that's how I began. They were raising me in that way, and I felt like my whole body, like so much of me, was not included in that prayer. And so that was one of the things that I really appreciated, was to have this embodied experience, which automatically, I mean, when you're in the sweat lodge, you can't think. This has to quiet down. In fact, that's what I say when I lead that ceremony, is I say, you know, it's going to be hot until your mind surrenders. But as soon as your mind surrenders, it's not going to be hot in here anymore. Because your mind is screaming like, well, what about this? And how about this? And what happens if this? And, you know, what if it gets, you know, it's like, you know, it's troubleshooting. The mind loves to create problems to solve. And so, yeah, it is a transcendent place. And I think in terms of maintaining that, it's been a process of letting go of that intellectual way of being, and also me-centered, and how am I doing relative to other humans. Letting that fall away then allows for me to be on this earth in a new way. And the earth is here everywhere, all the time, right? So, you know, let's not forget that underneath all this pavement, it's only about, what, 6 inches, 8 inches maybe? And we got, what do we say? We got like a mile to the center of the earth, or 6 miles. Anyway, it's long, it's big. We're on someplace big. And, you know, when I hear some of the elders say, you know, 1 heartbeat every 10,000 years, and we're living in that reverberation. You know, that's everywhere. It's right here in Louisville. So it's about reorienting to, again, I'll call it the larger community of flying ones, swimming ones, creepy crawling ones, 4-legged ones, and also the spiritual.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just want to say how grateful I am to be here, and it's such a privilege to be able to carry a little bit of the Quaker message in this realm. I just want to say that I first just really got enthralled with the Quaker faith from the readings of the 19th century founders, and I was reading Cynthia's book, Wisdom Way of Knowing, at one point, and I thought, wow, she's saying everything's about early Christianity here. What she's saying just reminds me of early Quakers. And Quakers didn't really fit in with the Protestant camp of Christians or the Catholic camp. They were just so unique in the 17th century, and it was kind of a outpouring of a mystical outbreak in a sense. And that's when I sent this CD to Cynthia saying, do you know about early Quakers? Everything you're saying sounds like what they experienced is mysticism, really. So I want to share just another quote from George Fox, who's kind of known as the founder. And then I'd like to teach another one to you all and have you sing it with me. But the first one I'll sing by myself. I saw that there was an ocean of darkness and death, but an infinite ocean of light and love, which flowed over the ocean of darkness. In that I also saw the infinite love of God, and I had great openings. I'll sing it again. I saw that there was an ocean of darkness and death, but an infinite ocean of light and love, which flowed over the ocean of darkness. In that I also saw the infinite love of God, and I had great openings. So this next song I want to teach you and have you chant it with me is actually from a little later in Quaker history, once they came to the United States and started doing very radical things like trying to get into the state of the colony of Massachusetts that didn't allow Quakers to come in. And there were 3 people who were hung in Boston Commons, 3 Quakers, 1 woman and 2 men, for continuing to press for religious freedom and being able to go where they would be called to go. And this next quotation is from one of those who were hung, William Robinson, and this is what in his writings right before he was hung. It's a very powerful statement. I think it fits with the theme that we're talking, a lot of the things we're talking about today. And what I'll do is I'll say it, then I'll sing it through once, and then I'll teach it in some parts, because it's a little long, but you'll get it. My mind just went blank. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me, from the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. When I sing this together with people, I like to change it from the father to mother, so we'll alternate like that. And I'll sing a line and you repeat, so we'll be call and response. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. Streams of my Father's love run daily through me. And we repeat that. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life, from the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. To the seed throughout the whole creation. Let's sing Mother this time. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation. Thank
Thank you so much. Cynthia,
Yes,
would you
ma'am.
please join this conversation?
I thought you'd never ask. Well, we're woken up now. Yeah. So how do I stand? I think my body needs to do this, not just my top half, but I want to not just turn my back to my distinguished elders.
We're right with you.
All right. So, okay. What I'm going to do is basically just say everything you've said, both of you, but in a slightly different frame and in a mashup way. I'm speaking from the Christian inner tradition. Please don't take anything that I'm about to say as Orthodox Christianity, or we'll all have an unhappy time. Nor is it even straight up contemplative Christianity, but it's informed by the wild men and women of the Eastern Orthodox tradition, Sufism, and some of these outpockets of Celtic and other mysticism where they've dived deep down the rabbit hole. So in the traditions that I've been working on and in, this word being is not something you are. Usually in the philosophical tradition, being is sort of a synonym for existence. This thing has being. But in the inner tradition, being is something you have. It's an energy. It's a gathered presence. It's a mindful, fierce attentiveness in your body, grounded in your feet, centered lower than your head, in the region of your heart and your torso. Here, feet deeply in contact with our mother, the earth, head in contact with the skies, but here, in the belly, in the heart. And in this configuration, not only are you truly present, but that presence is an energized presence. It communicates. It has a force. It beams out. It gives and receives as its own kind of sonar. And a person who has being can walk into a room and say absolutely nothing, and everybody knows that person's there. Such is the force of being. All of your tradition knows it well. All of our tradition is almost clueless. But we get it in our own sort of ways. So, in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, it was implicitly understood that this being gathered, that the name they called for this was attention of the heart, or in the heart. And they kept saying, you must bring your attention into your heart. Your mind must be within your heart. Come down, and it's clear in the text, they're not just talking about a nice little attitude about, oh, let's just be in touch with our feelings. They mean at the physical level of sensation, to be able to ground and shift your attention in this mid-reason as a whole alert presence. And when that happens, more energized, more alive, more awake, gradually a new operating system of perception kicks in. And the reason it hasn't kicked in earlier, the reason why we keep slipping back into the mind with its constant dualizing, is because that's the only being energy we have enough to run. It's not until we can gather our being in a more gathered presence that we have the higher, finer, more intense vibrational field that allows these other beautiful, mysterious, and more subtle and energized faculties of perception to kick in. When William Blake was talking about we are here on earth a little while to learn to bear the beams of love, that's what he's talking about, those beams. But when that happens, when the mind comes into the heart, a different kind of knowingness happens. And, you know, you can label it and you can borrow from Western versions of Eastern terminology and call it non-dual. The name has no force. It's a description by negation. In the traditions from which it comes, it's called sometimes seeing with the eye of the heart, seeing from the nous in the Greek, the nous being the eye of the heart. It's sometimes called contemplation, and contemplation doesn't mean resting in emptiness. The original definition was knowledge impregnated by love. Interesting. Try that in the halls of higher science. You know? Knowledge impregnated by love. In other words, actually working in a whole different vibrational field. A way in which you're no longer using the mind, which unfortunately runs the egoic operating system. The middle hardwiring is perception through differentiation. That's why we keep slipping back into dualism, because that's the way the mind perceives. It has to split the field to make inside, outside, me, it, subject, verb, as you said, do unto this, do unto that, because that's the operating system we run. And when we run that operating system, whose whole basic algorithm is perception through separation, how in the living hell are you going to perceive unity? It outruns the operating system. You just can't do it, because to actually perceive unity, you have to perceive from unity. And to try to perceive unity using the mind, meaning the rational facility, is like trying to take your old Underwood typewriter, if you could still remember what those are, and asking it to run the internet. It can't do it. It outruns the operating system. It's not because of the sinful self-will of the typewriter. It's just because it can't do unity with a programming that it relies on separation. So it's not a matter of shooting the mind, lobotomizing the mind. It's a matter of bringing the mind into the heart so it entrains with this deeper field, and in that knowledge, reaching out and actually perceiving by a kind of sonar, by a sympathetic vibrational intertwining, which allows you to get on the inside of everything. Suddenly, you see. And what you see is interbeing. Okay? You see, first of all, horizontally. And what you see when you look out on that horizontal axis, with the mind and the heart, with knowledge impregnated by love, grounded and present, is you really do see oneness directly. Not as a vicarious concept, not as an ideal called non-dualism, as an actual luminous web, everything connected to everything else within one glowing and very dynamic feedback field. That's what Jesus saw when he walked the planet as probably the first representative of this in the West, and said, love your neighbor as yourself, not as much as yourself. We added as much as yourself in with that old typewriter operating program that says, I have to love me first, and then I can love everybody else. Love your neighbor as yourself. Virtual particles, interchangeable within the field. Okay? Can you do that? Not with the mind. Yes, with the mind and the heart. And when he told us that's most brilliant and difficult of his parables about the laborers in the vineyard, remember the guys that show up at 5:30 in the morning and get hired to work, and the guys that show up 12 hours later, and when they get paid, they all get paid the same? You know, when you're in your mind, you will immediately say, it's not fair. Because what are you keeping track of? More and less, right? That's the mind. When you're in the heart, you see that what the landowner sees is a participational field in which being invited into the vineyard has nothing to do with getting his crops harvested or earning a living or beating out the other guys with the competitive edge. It has to do with creating a participational field. Why are you standing idle, he asks. And they say, because no one has hired us. You too. Go into the vineyard. Go into the field. Go into the collective inner being, Buddha nature, which is divine consciousness made manifest in form. And there dance and give and take and see and be. So we see horizontally, and I think that it's only when our mind is in the heart that we will ever see it. The reason I believe that Christianity has made a hypocrisy of itself for 2,000 years is because we keep trying to do this beautiful vision, which is totally non-dual, totally fully inter-being oriented, with a mind that separates, that perceives scarcity and lack and competition, so we wind up making fools of ourselves. But it's not because the message is wrong, it's because the message hasn't been lived yet, except by these beautiful few that we remember as the ones who truly had being on this path and who passed it on. We also see, when we look through these eyes, we see worlds within worlds within worlds. When you were talking so beautifully about all these spirit worlds and things that these shifty-eyed white people didn't even think existed, oh, they exist. Yes, and all the sacred traditions, wisdom traditions, have affirmed. They call them by different names. They call them the subtle world, the spirit world, the thin places, liminal spaces. My own languaging for it is the imaginal realm. And it's a realm that surrounds and envelops ours like a beautiful placenta enveloping the womb of our little finite planet. And in this, information and substance and nutrients are exchanged, and we receive help, and we give back help. And we find our place, and we transform the fruits of our lifetime into other things we're tasting here. Generosity, forbearance, truth, goodness, light, joy. And these become substances which nurture our planet. And when we fail to do that as human beings, and when instead what we put out into the planet is greed and isolation and separation and competition and, we're putting poison into the planet, spiritual poison, which is as toxic and as causative as the lethal poisons we put in with our gas and our pollution and everything else. It is our human place, when we understand the worlds within worlds, to participate in the generation of these wonderful things. They're called in the Christian tradition the fruits of the Spirit, which are our alchemical contribution to the life, the health, the beauty of this wonderful body of interbeing that we are. And only in making that contribution can we find our place, our meaning, our wholeness, and our relatedness with everything. But we need these maps that are large enough to tell us that. You're not going to get it in traditional faith. You're not going to get it in traditional rational science. We need groups of practitioners like this that have the boldness to go back and find the new, old, indigenous wisdom maps, boldly shift them from an individual perspective, which dominated the axial age, into this new, genuinely higher collective vision. Imagine Buddha nature, salvation, emergent properties of the whole, not available in the individual cell, except as we participate. Wonderful, wonderful way of thinking how we belong together. But these are just kind of little things I want to throw out with you to tease you with and to affirm how what's being said in so many different ways and voices by so many gifted teachers from these traditions is really good, true, profound, liberating reorientation for our own age. And what I'd like to do, if I can, is to end my little segment of this by calling Paulette back up on the stage again. And I hope they didn't take away your mic. There it is. And I want us to sing that, The Streams of My Father's Love, again, but I want you all to stand as you do it. And plant your feet on the ground like we did this morning, if you can remember back that early. And the text, the streams of my Father's love flowed daily through me from the holy fountain of life, from some great vast thing, to the seed, that's D at the end, the seed throughout the whole creation. There's this art of exchange, of giving and receiving, of nurturance, virtual, horizontal, that flows right through the awake human heart. And as we sing it this time, and we'll sing it twice, see if you can actually sense that in yourself. See if you can sense that even right here and now, you are part of a vast, cascading, dynamic web of exchange, whose final name is love. Okay, my dear.
The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. The streams of my Father's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the sea throughout the whole creation. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. The streams of my mother's love run daily through me. From the holy fountain of life to the seed throughout the whole creation.
And may that seed bear fruit in each one of us and in our one cosmos. Thank you. Back to the next one.
Beautiful. Thank you. Cynthia, you spoke about the operating system that is, as Gerardo pointed to, so habitual, that divides and separates, and mostly that's what we're walking around in. And yet you created an experience for us in which maybe we had a taste of a different operating system. And there was a personal practice part of that involved, dropping our consciousness to our heart. And there was a collective practice of that involved. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to what you see as possible through gatherings like this, where there's an intentionality to change our habitual ways of perceiving and practice, and a container held that supports this dropping. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think I would say in the first place that we sometimes put the emphasis on the wrong thing, and we kind of beat ourselves up and shame ourselves about, well, I changed my habit. I think at the final analysis, it's an energetic issue more than a moral issue, or even, strictly speaking, a perceptual issue. Because until you have gathered and collected your presence sufficiently, you're going to run the old default system because it runs at a lower energy. It's all you can do. And so until a certain reservoir, certain critical threshold of beingness is generated and maintained, it's impossible to escape the gravitational field of dualistic, egoic, middle rational thinking. And the problem with our Western world is we've just said that that's the only thinking there is. We've refused to acknowledge there's any other fields out there. But so I think that experiences like this, traditionally, this kind of energy boosting and gathering and centering has been done through sacred devotion and ritual. Mm-hmm. You know, and it happens even very quietly in meditation. And it happens really profoundly in some of the more exuberant rituals, from Sufi turning to, you know, sweat lodges to all sorts of wonderful things. I got to go to spend some time with the Bhutanese Buddhists not long ago, and still playing on the vast horns and the banging of the drums, and just something in the whole being wakes up. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in the collective gatherings with the intention to essentially raise our energy field, not just to have a spiritual high, but to make something possible in perception that we can remember and walk out of. You know, we can't disregard energy. We can't disregard the life force that runs through our connection with humanity, our connection with all sentient beings. And we think we can cut ourselves off from the life force and just observe it and talk about it. We're fools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We're very happy for everything you've given to us over these last few days. And I think I would like to start to continue this conversation, which might lead to some questions, including can things be fixed, and other questions arising from what you both shared with us brilliantly. But Owsley, have you got anything to say?
Well, I don't know. Let's see. This is a mighty crew to be joining. Thank you, mighty crew.
Thank you, mighty one.
There were some things that occurred to me while listening to you. One was the subject of humility, and the other was to do with how that might relate to, let me think out loud, can I make a connection here? To the subject of attachment, and how that relates to kind of expectation. So I guess I'll work backwards. I think that what I hear you all saying, and I certainly think about a lot in my life, and has, I think, been brought forth in many ways over the course of these past days, is what to do with expectation in some way. And this is connected to intention, so I'll try to stream all these things, to link these things together. But you know, I have just experienced in terms of noticing, you know, when you kind of tap into the territory that we're, I think, getting at, which is sort of the contemplative space, which, you know, definitely involves looking within, but then in some way is connected to experiencing without. Mm-hmm. And I guess the idea is the more you can dance a little bit between the looking within, the more you can notice different things when you're looking without, and all of a sudden things start informing in all kinds of dynamic directions. So that's very interesting. This expectation thing to me is just somehow where the rubber meets the road. You know, in terms of fixability, and in terms of looking at history and time and so on, I mean, we are given what we're given in terms of social, cultural overlays. We're born into our families, which are part of our neighborhoods, which are part of our towns and our cities and our states, etc. And all those things have this inextricable link to at least just knowable history, let alone what we can't even fathom or comprehend because we haven't. Yeah.
I mean, I've just been told, this is so interesting, I've just been told this, in less than 5 minutes there may be a very extraordinarily loud noise as a bunch of F-16s fly over us. So how interesting that we, so here I am, an angry activist in therapy, trying to calm myself to believe that
Stay
there's
cool,
nothing
man. Stay
to
cool.
do, nothing can be healed.
This is what I was trying to say, actually. This is actually the whole point I was trying to make. Like, we have this expectation that it should be all really mellow, and I can make this big point or whatever we're all going to make. And, you know, we just really, but we have no control. But does that mean that I shouldn't try to answer your question wholeheartedly? No, I think, I think I should try to answer your question wholeheartedly. But the trick is, do I freak out when the F-16 goes over my head? And I really mean it. I really think this is, to me, where the rubber meets the road. Can we recognize that to go with all of our might, like find it within ourselves to just, like we got 1 second left to live, what do we want to do all the time? Mm-hmm. And then, maybe if we pause enough, we can sort of think, well, maybe if I were to live, a little bit longer than a second, I might actually dream of doing 2 things instead of just 1. A la you could have a little bit of information that you can reflect on and say, well, okay, this might be a good way to go. And you do that and you go for it, but you somehow can find a way, which I think is what this contemplative practice is all about, to truly be okay with whatever comes. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. I really think that's, is that what you're talking about?
So Elizabeth, please.
I think for the mind that tends to divide things, it's a conundrum. You either fix it or you don't. I'm not talking about that. And I do think there's a difference between fixing and healing. And maybe I could say something about that. But looking at realistically at the fact that everything leans, we don't know, we don't even see the whole picture. So maybe we all have a different idea of what is it we want to fix. But fix means bringing something to a static state of peaceful equilibrium. That's not a possibility.
So we're not going to stop
happens.
wars.
Well, it also means,
but that's a very singular idea. Like, what does it mean to fix the world? The world is a huge place. Every inch of Earth is different and changing and dynamic. So it's not even a singular thing. And it's influenced by so many other things, and we don't have control over it. So fixing, this idea of bringing it to a static state of what we think it should be, no, that doesn't sound realistic, does it to you? And yet, healing, does it mean that we have no efficacy? No. This is a sensitive system because everything leans. We have tremendous power to influence what happens. And so this is what's called a bodhisattva.
but not control outcomes.
But yeah, we can't control. That's
So
not
we can
realistic.
strive, but we must strive not expecting a certain outcome.
And strive, if I can just say, strive to open our view and vision and keep going. And then when it feels really uncomfortable, keep going. And then when it feels really uncomfortable, keep going. Like, how open can we really be? Because that's a very powerful thing too, because then all of a sudden expectation, the field within which expectation is occurring is expanding. You know what I mean? So there's more room for a variety of outcomes if our experiential view and how we hold our experience can open up a bit.
Right.
So can we fix the conflict in Syria? Can we sort the farm bill out?
Well, let me say, fix comes from the machine metaphor. Fix comes from the machine metaphor. So I'm old enough that you could actually fix a car. You could actually climb under the hood and find the broken part, take it out, and put another one in. And that is how we came to think of the world, as like that. It's part of the objectification of the world. So I think that skipping fix is a good idea. right? But heal is a completely different thing. It's an English word. It comes from wholeness, the idea of things being integrated. And that we can work towards. And one of the ways we can work toward it is this inner-outer. As I said, everything is in you. And so, as they say in psychology, if you spot it, you got it. So if you see something that either attracts you deeply or repulses you deeply,
It's in you.
you're being asked by yourself to look within and find what that is and to bring it into a more conscious wholeness within. And that starts to heal the world outside because of the leaning quality of the world. So you see it, you start to give it voice, let it integrate, and because it's all connected, the system starts to change as well.
I sense you're frustrated with my state and that there's more you need to share.
I think whatever you're working with right there is really helpful in pressing at the point that needs to be pressed at. And I appreciate it, you know. But I think also you haven't, maybe, I don't know, you consider, this is a really important point, this fixing and healing. But you should also know that it's because everything leans that you can influence.
Right.
If things didn't lean, they'd be inert.
It means it's a system.
It's good news, you know.
Yeah.
But we say in our tradition, you know, we have that term bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is somebody who sees that the world is not a static place, who understands the nature of interdependence, which means things are not fixed, and can bear it. Bear that not being right. Bear that not knowing things in a determinate way, while at the same time trying with all their might to change the sufferings of the world and be there for everyone. So sometimes I phrase it as, you know, someone who burns with love in a world they can't fix. And that's a bodhisattva's, that to rest in that conundrum is the resting place of the bodhisattva.
Because your motivation in that case isn't to fix, it's to be
not to
in.
fix,
So
to
here's
respond.
Yes, so I want to ask you if this is what you mean, and I've always taken this when you've said this. All this language is so interesting, but the idea of being in relationship is, I think, you know, to me, this is an in relationship little mudra. And that is so profound to me because, particularly if you go back to this thing that I was just mentioning about how open can we be, the problem is we want to choose what we're in relationship with. And that is a big problem because, for example, most of us, for example, myself, does not want to be in relationship with mortality, for example. You know, I don't want to die.
Just to pick one out.
Just to pick one thing, you know, just that, you know. So, I mean, for example, you know, but that is a big time problem.
Yeah.
Because
Also, another issue related to this is that we have a responsibility to work with all these forces that are in the world.
Yeah.
If the transition is only just undergoing now, and there are many people who are seeing the world in a very different way than you've been sharing with us, then we need to find a way to communicate with people who are still maybe just slightly behind the curve of change that's going on, you know?
that's what we want to do here.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, the story of the Sleeping Beauty is the key to everything.
Right?
And so the reason that's true, it's not about the kiss of the prince, it's about the baptism, the christening of the princess. And her parents, the king and the queen, sent out invitations, but they deliberately left one fairy out because she was a problem. She's the problem relative. And so 11 of the fairy godmothers have given their gifts of love in the way of wishes to the princess. And then Carabosse blows in to the room full of wrath because she's been left out. She's not in the picture. And she curses the princess and says, "You will die when your finger is pricked." But then the little dumpy, as Disney tells it, the little dumpy last fairy godmother comes out and says, "No, I've got one more wish and I can ameliorate this. I can't make it go away, but I can bring some healing to this." So it's the leaving out of not relating to the forces of the world, dark or shadowy or light, that causes the system to be out of whack.
Do you think this is a good moment to open up this discussion?
I think it's a good moment.
I'm wondering if there's a microphone. Is there a
There's supposed to be a microphone.
I'm going to just come
somewhere.
forward. Who would like to
And
to share their thoughts
we
with
do
us?
have the house
bring
light
up
on,
the
but I think
house
we can
lights.
manage it. We can't see you, but the
Yeah.
microphone holder,
Oh, here we are.
Stephen or Doug, and we have
Oh,
a
no. Is
microphone.
there a microphone in the house?
Yeah, coming
Yes.
right there on
Someone is
your
rising
right. Here's the, there we go. So that goes right.
Here we go in the second row.
Yeah.
Could they bring up the house lights a bit?
Yeah,
I
could
think
we
it's-
have...
I think it's, unfortunately,
It's
I think it's an
impossible.
all or nothing kind
Okay.
of deal.
So
So, I mean, not that we shouldn't have
we
all.
stay with what is.
But yeah, there we go. It's coming up, but I think, well, yeah, good.
The
Perfect.
chandeliers are lit.
Yeah.
Please.
The fairy godmothers have arrived.
So many words I could say to start this question, including relationship and healing and reconciliation and justice. I'm thinking, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the importance or the value of acknowledging our relationships that we don't want to connect with, specifically white privilege and Christian imperialism that brought us to the turning that requires the great turning. So please, your thoughts.
Thank you for that.
I can do one quick thing. I had dinner with Sadiqa Reynolds last night, and we talked specifically about this, and her request of me and our table was, don't worry so much, just kind of like little, it's like, believe me, she basically was saying, have some guts. She said, face what you don't want to face as it relates to white privilege and the stain of slavery. And we didn't even talk about, well, we did talk about the genocide of Native peoples in all of the Americas. But her point was, please just have the conversation. And obviously forums matter. She was also suggesting that not everybody can have the conversation at the same level. So try to find, basically make the bar low enough that you feel you can succeed. I thought that was very interesting.
Yes.
There's the Christian word that gets used as repentance is, I think, a pretty poor translation of the word that occurs in the New Testament. And that word is metanoia. And noia is your mind, but it's much more than your brain. It's your whole sentience. And meta is another one. So to repent in the original sense is to get a mind that is necessary for this moment, rather than the mind that was adequate for the moments past. And I think that relates to what Owsley's saying, is that, or your dinner mate last night, is that it's not so much about guilt or shame, but about truly openly seeking the mind that we together need for this new turning.
Another question, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, it's on. Hi, my name is Ganga Devi. I know most of the people on the stage, but not all of you. My comment isn't so much a question, but I would like to add to the conversation, if that's all right. I attended the Radical Compassion Symposium at Naropa a few years ago, and Vandana Shiva, many of you hopefully know, she's one of the most incredible activists on the planet right now. She's a fierce farmer and one of the greatest enemies of Monsanto. She's doing amazing work on behalf of the whole planet. And a huge takeaway that I had from that experience that I'd like to offer to the conversation is that she said that we can't be attached to the fruits of our labor. As farmers, as activists, as people doing the best that they can on this planet, all we can control is the impulse from which our actions come. And that's what I hear coming through this entire festival. And I'd also like to speak very, very briefly to what the bishop was saying at the end of your presentation about the singularity and about technology as a young person who has recently become involved with not just the ecological work that I do and the interfaith work that I do, but also a lot of tech millionaires in Silicon Valley recently. Yeah. And the work that they are focused on has so much to do with what has been discussed during this festival. And I wish many of them were here. I'm going to be going there in a few weeks, and I'm planning on bringing what I've gathered from this experience to them. because they are focused on regenerating the planet. They are focused on increasing the capacity of humans for compassion through technology.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable, the work that's being done, and I'm so deeply encouraged by it. I used to be incredibly cynical, and now I'm just remarkably full of hope, a hope that's based in constant action, because I recognize that every moment, not just marching, but every breath, every thought, every prayer has massive implications.
Yeah.
And I've learned that through the years of studying with Elizabeth and through understanding interdependence with the work of Joanna Macy as well. So I just love to thank all of you, and from my generation, to encourage you all that we're taking on much of the mantle, and to thank you all for the work that you all are doing as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, maybe you've got some comments on the technology part of her question, but I would like to share with you my thoughts about the first part, which is relating to Vandana Shiva, who is undoubtedly one of the most remarkable communicators and activists on the planet today. But she is, as you said, she's a friend of mine, angry. And the place of anger, righteous anger, when witnessing violations of various kinds. In Vandana's case, her concern is both of the peasant farmers of India and elsewhere, but also of the violation on nature. What is the place of anger in the response that we have to the sort of issues that we've been discussing throughout this conference?
I'd like to take that, if I could. You know, first of all, if you're angry at anyone or anything, you're going to have to be angry at the nature of interdependence. Because that's who's responsible for things working out the way that they do, actually. You know, people
Angry at the nature
of interdependence.
Of interdependence. So you're saying that anger, are you saying that anger is an inappropriate response?
I'm not saying it's an inappropriate, but I think it's a response that comes from not seeing how things are, if I may be so bold. I think to fiercely want to respond to the world around you, that's extremely noble. And I can see you have that in
So
spades.
there's a difference between fierceness and anger.
Well, I'm just making that distinction in that anger has that kind of divisive quality. It has a certain rightness in it. It has rightness in it. And I think more awe and less rightness helps us relate more accurately to the world as it is.
Mark, Owsley, you want to say something?
I mean, Elizabeth's always right. And I think anger, if anger is repressed, I mean, if you don't feel there's a place for anger, then that probably means that anger needs to be voiced.
Yes, because surely it is one of the most important issues
It's
of our
there.
time
Yeah.
at this event and in relation to what's happening in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
and you know the homeopathic theory of
Right.
Maoism, that if you suppress something, it comes out.
That's what I'm saying. So that's this integrating work. It is in us. It may not be healthy to hold on to. Certainly it's not. But to not voice it is also a danger, it seems to me.
How can that be reconciled?
Well, there's I wanted to talk at some point, maybe another festival
We
perhaps.
only have 7
I
minutes.
know. I won't. But the passage where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, as he makes his way to his friend, one of his best friend's tomb, he stops twice. And this word occurs one of them only occurs in Greek literature. In this place and a couple of other places in all of Greek literature. And it's a word for being stirred up inside. And it's almost like he deliberately stirs up his power that he's going to direct towards the righting of this wrong. And so that kind of anger, I think, like we can think of Shiva overcoming ignorance. We can think of, there's two good examples.
Good.
Yeah.
Owsley.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's understanding the nature of interdependence, which is, for me, it's certainly an ongoing exercise. And then there's the, I'm just incredibly ignited with anger by a thing problem. So to me, those are two things I wrestle with. One is understanding the nature of interdependence and trying to kind of assimilate that into my whole being best as I can. And then there's the what do I do when my button gets pushed problem. You know, and I do seem to notice that my button is maybe a little less easier, a little harder to push, or let's say when it's put, this is what I notice. Recovery is a little easier with some practice. But I do think that the energy itself is just that. I mean,
Yes,
it's an energy, and it should be looked at and understood and respected for what it is,
Right.
but not reified.
Right.
I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
this idea.
And that's the dividing
the
line in our
rightness part.
tradition.
That's-
That the rightness is what is a reification.
That's the reification thing. That idea of making your anger the truth.
Yeah.
That becomes the big problem.
Okay. Brief comments on the technology.
Well,
element?
I think that it's so encouraging what you said, and I think the idea, I think there's a great longing, it's what Owsley has said to me, in Silicon Valley and elsewhere for this conversation. I think we're longing for it. And we're longing for it, because it's not just we're the ones using this technology 24/7 in every way, and we're dragging it with us into this new world. So it's incumbent on us who are meaning seekers to be in this conversation with people who want to be in the conversation. So I would say we need to invite them to the Festival of Faiths.
Good idea.
Serious comment, actually. Yes. Serious comment.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, please invite them to the Festival of Faiths. We're having one in 12 months. It would be, I've got lots of seats, hotel rooms, no problem for
Maybe
you
we
and your
could
friends.
even do after the Sacred Feminine on
Yeah,
the
technology would be a
technologicals
great...
on the singularity.
On the singularity. It's a super great idea.
Right, no,
I'm not
there's-
trying to push that.
Yeah.
This may be the last question, unless there's somebody else who's got a burning point.
I would.
Okay, two more then. We'll have them both.
I enjoy this conversation very much. I would just like to add that we are part of a conversation thousands of years old, beginning with Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and especially Descartes, and the Cartesian dualism of the cogito. You raised the question, Bishop, a while ago about the French Revolution, Napoleon, the 17th century Enlightenment, and the dualism that comes out of that, the narcissism of the cogito. And I think John McMurray, a Scottish philosopher, has addressed it very well. I would really like to hear John McMurray a part of this conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And there's one more, I think, is there?
Yeah, right here.
Here we go.
No, right here.
Oh, here.
It's on. Just start.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. I was born in Scotland, raised in Canada, lived here for 15 years. Now I've been back in Canada for the next 8 years. Been going to the Festival of Faith for 22 years. I'm disappointed that things haven't changed as much as I thought they should. And the faces in the audience are still white, predominantly, and wealthy. And so it's systemic change that needs to happen. You need to get rid of the racism, the uneducated. There's 101 million uneducated girls in the world. What are we doing about that? If you want to change the world, you educate your girls.
Well, I certainly should speak
Okay.
for the... Yeah,
There's one, I think, did you want to... Can we just have the last one, because then we can...
I was just going to say, I should speak for the festival just because they just showed up at my invitation, or our invitation. I mean, look, what I can tell you is, having now gotten into this on the local level best as I can, it is incredibly real work. And I would invite you, I mean, really, in all seriousness, to come after this and let's huddle and let's, get each other's contact and we can share ideas, because the work is never going to end, I don't think. There's always going to be injustice. There's always going to be imperfection. And that's back to this thing of the intention. I'm sensing, I can't see you, but I can hear you. The frustration is what's fueling me. I know it's what's fueling our team. And I don't mean to sound defensive. I mean to sound in solidarity with you, like, you got it. That is the problem. That is the big time problem. And seems to me kind of, we've always had big time problems, and hopefully we can have a whole lot less of them. And if we don't, who knows what we're going to have, because the stakes are so high, the situation is so fragile, we got to go like crazy. But in the face of disappointment, we still got to go like crazy. So that's, to me, when you say it's unfixable, it means actually, and you got to double down almost. It's not it's unfixable and you give up. It's unfixable and you just keep going and going and going. So, but please, after this session, let's get together.
Okay, thank you. And now we've got the last point.
So Owsley may have just answered my question, and I don't mean to sound smart aleck, but I understand the epistemological thing about the sticks. I understand the semantics between fix and heal, but I'm really worried about the planet, and I'm wondering, what am I supposed to do about things like climate change other than try to heal myself? It seems like I have the luxury to try to move the ball further along and that I should, and so I want to hear what message you mean to say about that, please.
Well, I'd like to.
Thank you very much for that question.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're speaking to, by the way, a major activist and political champion and hero of this region and town.
Okay,
So,
well then I won't.
yeah, sorry, just so you know. No, please answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say this morning about the ability for us to be part of the actual solution of keeping the U.S. commitment to the Paris Agreement is, I believe, a very important idea. The U.S. agreement is very simple. It is taking 2005 as a base and reducing carbon in the United States, carbon production by 28% by 2025. This is doable, and it is work that we can do, and it is work that will not be done under the auspices of the federal government. So that's my answer. We can do this, and the faith communities, which is the festival of, we could play a significant role in that.
Elizabeth.
So, Bishop Mark is an organizer. I'm not so much of an organizer, but I think there are opportunities everywhere to be of benefit. And I think when you're awake and you're feeling yourself in the nature of interdependence, you find opportunities everywhere all day long. And I just mean in very simple ways. I mean even recycling. Or, sometimes it's I feel myself frustrated because you look at these huge problems and you do want something to change. I mean, it's not as if I don't want something to change. I just am looking at the nature of how things are, but I have that longing. It's like that burning feeling. It's a poignancy. It's not passive whatsoever. I do also agree that we can't afford to be passive. We have to respond. We have to always be awake and looking. And sometimes, activism to me, I almost want to rephrase it as responsiveness, because, you're in the pool, you have a lane to yourself, and there's always this tension about getting a lane, and somebody comes, is waiting at the edge of the pool, and they're feeling anxious, and you say, hop in. And it changes the whole feeling of the situation, and all day long they feel sustained, and you feel sustained by the goodness or the nobleness of your own mind. I don't know what, recently my dad was in ICU, and then he had to go into a rehab for 3 weeks, and I went into the nursing home, and there's all these old people, and it's very painful, and, one lady was saying, fretting about her hair. I think she had Alzheimer's, and she said, nobody loves me, and she was howling, and and then I just felt so stirred, and I said, well, I love you. And she said, you do? And I said, yeah, I do. And then her whole demeanor changed, and then the nurse came up and asked her, do you want to go? They're having some music and dancing, and she got up in her chair, and she started going like this all the way down the hall, doing the cha-cha. It was so sweet, and I realized you can turn around you talk about a world, that is changing the world for somebody in that moment. It's not a fix, it's a heal. And that's all because it's, when we talk about these big issues, like what do we do about North Korea? What do we do about the earth? Where is the earth? I can't find it. I mean, I see the picture, but it's not necessary, that's so abstract to me. So I feel overwhelmed and fall into despair that way. But when I realize I need to have a more direct relationship with reality, which is what I can do in the moment. Like if I find myself in a situation where I'm poised to do something that's very broad, I will do it. But most people don't find themselves with that much power. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? So you do everything you can, or you organize like Mark does.
And can I just want to add too, because I think that like this is obviously an age-old question, let's just say, for the sake of discussion, to the point that was made earlier. This is not, so does a contemplative life have a role for an audience like this? I would say absolutely. Yeah. I mean, theoretically you would be gone if from this session at least, if you didn't think there was something that you were at least curious to learn about. And if that curiosity is as genuine as I believe it to be, I am here to say, at least from my own point of view, I know these three would agree, that is essential. Wisdom is, we think at the Festival of Faith, there's such a thing as wisdom, and that it's super important, and that it could be forgotten, and we should never forget it. Now, how are you going to go about that? Whole nother conversation, but let's just park that. I know that Patrick he founded the organic movement in the UK. And he was, fight the power kind of guy for 30 years. And he had his own epiphany right here. I'm talking about your meeting at Yum, where he went in as one of the most important global voices, best friends with Vandana Shiva on the fight the power on big ag, versus a sustainable vision for how we can all live on this planet with respect to agriculture. And he sat opposite the chief executive officer of, one of the biggest fast food companies on the planet. And what he told me, I should let you speak, but it's sort of fun to speak for you. What he told me coming out of that meeting was, wow. What I encountered, Owsley, when I sat opposite the chief executive officer of Yum Brands was a fellow human being who was actually doing everything that he could do relative to what he understood, what he believed in, what he could get his head and heart around, relative to what he could do. And actually, by kind of receiving his relative truth, Patrick told me, they went on to have a very dynamic exchange, which is still going on to this day. And Patrick said to me, coming out of that meeting, this us and them model that I was a leader of for a really long time is over. It's us and us alone. And what do we want to do about it?
So, Owsley,
That's right.
Is that
right?
It is. Great. So, speaking of
key
over.
for me and what you said was receive.
Yeah.
So Patrick received his truth into him. I mean, he received it into him. And that's where the healing starts to take place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's time. And I think, I imagine there are some closing words. Is this right?
Yeah, this is it.
So,
Did I tell that story right? Was that all right?
Yes, I'll say a word about that now. But I would like to say this, that for me this conversation has been profound and really, it's brought me to the edge of deep questions that I'm living with and have lived with for years. And I don't think you can do, that's for me the most important thing, to be in front of these profound questions. And so I would just like to say thank you to Mark, to Elizabeth, and to Owsley for joining me for this conversation.
Thank you.